Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace,
And I'm John Crocker.
and today we're going to be talking about Marvel movies, but not in the traditional Marvel Cinematic Universe that we normally do. Today, we're going to be talking about the 20th Century Fox Marvelverse, and that's going to be the X-Men movies. And now, the X-Men movies have actually been around for a super long time, starting with X-Men 1 way back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then it's just progressed through Dark Phoenix, just released this weekend, and that's still within the same universe of the original X-Men movies that started way back then. But now, it seems as if it doesn't seem as if Disney has bought 20th Century Fox, and it looks like all of the X-Men are going to kind of get thrown out the window, except for I've heard maybe Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, and be brought in to the Disney universe. So Dark Phoenix may be the last X-Men movie to come out. So we thought, let's just talk about the X-Men movies, what they've meant to us, what we're excited to see in the future, things that we think could have been changed from the jump, and all that kind of stuff.
So they actually put all of these X-Men in the same universe. So even like pre-Marvel verse, this was a good bit of actual movie, cinema and movie and all that out there that are all in the same universe with one another. So at like no point in time any of these have like broken too many rules or retcon too much stuff, you would say?
No, I wouldn't say that. they retcon stuff like backwards and forwards. Emma Frost appears as a mutant that's been kidnapped in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think takes place in the 70s or 80s. And then she reappears in X-Men First Class, where she looks older, but it's in the 60s. And she's not like a student or anything anymore. And so, yeah, they've definitely retconned a lot. Plus, Charles Xavier, and like especially with First Class, they've retconned a million things. Mystique was evil in the first couple movies, but then because Jennifer Lawrence was playing her when she was relatively unknown, but then the Hunger Games happened, she became a main like good guy character. So they've definitely retconned a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, so it is all a cohesive universe, but at the same time, they take way more liberties, and they may not, I guess they just don't uphold the laws of canon like, someone like Marvel or Star Wars or someone like that has so far. Now with Marvel, they've sort of baked in an excuse to be able to do anything they want to do. But so far, they've been pretty diligent about keeping things moving forward.
Yeah, and they kind of tried to explain it all with Days of Future Past, which was the crossover movie basically between the new cast and the old cast. They tried to just be like, oh, time travel, change the universes. So they definitely like went back and was like, look at that. It's totally different now.
That was probably one of my favorites. I feel like Days of Future Past obviously it just had so many people, so much action. I feel like I say this every single podcast we do. It suffered a little bit because there were too many heroes and not enough time for one movie. But other than that, I thought Days of Future Past was probably it's in my like top 4.
Yeah, I think Days of Future Past is my favorite X-Men movie, like X-Men proper, that doesn't include like any of the Wolverine spinoffs or Deadpool movies.
Yeah, that is another sort of weird thing about this franchise is most of the spinoffs are all about Wolverine, and then we have the recent Deadpools. But other than that, they really haven't gone too crazy. Now, I guess Dark Phoenix would technically be a spinoff, but really, like, we never got the Gambit movie that was promised to us. And I think we were supposed to get like a Silver Surfer and a Doctor Doom at some point too that we never got.
Yeah, but that's more like Fantastic Four stuff. That's not necessarily X-Men. But Dark Phoenix isn't a spinoff. It's a sequel to like the new class of X-Men.
Yeah. Oh, you say it's not a spinoff, or it is?
No, it's not. It's in the same. It's like all the same characters from First Class and Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse. It's just the next movie in that storyline.
Okay, so it doesn't like take a very narrow focus on Dark Phoenix or on Phoenix.
I mean, it does, but all the other characters are also in it. Like it's still the next part of the story, but it is basically. And I actually just saw it today. And as my wife and I were driving home, I was like, it was kind of Sophie Turner featuring the X-Men. Like it wasn't really an X-Men movie, which is probably why they didn't call it X-Men Dark Phoenix, because it wasn't really.
Gotcha. Well, tell me your thoughts. I haven't seen it yet, but this podcast has traditionally been a spoiler cast, and it's a relatively new movie. So go crazy. Don't hold back because of me.
Okay, so first thoughts, it was an entertaining movie. I wasn't ever like mad at it. The story was pretty good, but they made a lot of strange choices. Number one, the fact that it is specifically just like a Jean Grey movie. Like that's it. She's the main character. The other people are only there to help her story. And so because of that, the rest of the X-Men who we've been with since 2000, I think 11, the First Class came out, 2012, something around there. All these other X-Men who we've been with for so long basically just get kind of pushed to the wayside. And the number one thing I was super excited about from X-Men Apocalypse was that end scene setting up the team as we know it right now. And we get to see the team as it's assembled in action once. And then that's it. And then they fight Phoenix and a bunch of stuff goes wrong and we don't ever see that team assembled again. We see parts of it assembled, but never the full team. And that brings me to probably the biggest issue I had with the movie. Quicksilver, who is one of my favorite characters in that universe, he is, at least in these last couple movies, he's always been kind of like the brevity of the situation. He's been the one where like if stuff goes wrong, he's able to crack a joke or something and kind of get the audience like, oh, okay, ha ha ha, like fine, this was a really sad scene, but like ha ha ha, we're back in the movie. But they knock him out in fight 2 and he's out the rest of the movie. And so without him, the movie's just bleak. It's just sad characters going after other sad characters, and everybody's sad for different sad reasons. And 2 of my favorites from Apocalypse, which were Nightcrawler and Storm, are basically only there because they were promised in the last movie. Like they could have been switched out with any other X-Men and it wouldn't have mattered because they didn't really play hugely important parts. I mean, they helped like in the fights and stuff, but they very easily could have been taken out and replaced with anybody else. So they weren't really needed. Magneto was shoehorned in. He wasn't really needed, but they were like, oh, well, Michael Fassbender said he'd come back. So they brought him back, but like his story wasn't needed. Basically, because it was so hyper-focused on Dark Phoenix, like what you were saying earlier, everybody else just felt unnecessary. Like there was no reason besides really Dark Phoenix and Professor X to be in that movie, other than to have Dark Phoenix mess people up and be like, oh no, we have to stop her, and give us some kind of story.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you know, it's that same old story where there's like too many people that we want to know more about. I mean, I would love to get like an somewhat of a Marvel style X-Men series of just origin movies or sort of solo focus movies, but do it like Marvel did, where you're not tempted by the rest of the universe during each of those movies. You know, really most of what I've heard about Dark Phoenix is that it's gorgeous, it's, you know, well shot, it looks good, and there's a lot of good action, but the story and characters and everything else were just lackluster.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The movie looks really good, and the soundtrack is incredible. But yeah, I mean, the characters are just there. Like they're just there for no other reason than the fact that they're there. And like Cyclops is his main storyline, and this is a point that our friend Dylan, who was on the podcast before in our DC episode, has brought up to me, and he's saying like he hates the way Cyclops is portrayed in the movies because in the animated TV show and in comic books and stuff, he's just such like an awesome leader of the X-Men and a member of the X-Men who just so happens to also be in a relationship with Jean Grey. But for the movies, it's literally only boiled down to he's in a relationship with Jean Grey. So, I mean, like, I would say at least a good 80% of his lines in this movie were, Jean!
Oh, geez. Yeah. I like Cyclops. I've always been a fan of his.
I do too. I love the character, but now it's like that glass shattering thing because he said that I was unable to not see it when I was watching this movie, and I was like, oh, they did it again.
I mean, that's true. That's been true in the past as well. I mean, I remember, what movie was it where, well, gosh, I'm trying to think of different things here. I remember them like standing by a lake and Jane Grey just having like destroyed something awful or killed somebody, or I know she kills Cyclops at some point too, doesn't she?
Yeah, she kills Cyclops in The Last Stand, the third X-Men movie. This is the second time
That's
the Dark Phoenix story has been adapted by this universe.
Gotcha. And those, I remember the sunglasses that Cyclops wore, like the sort of dark rose color shades. I remember wanting those so bad. I think they were a pair of Oakleys. Like, I think they were actually like, custom Oakleys made for him for that movie. And I wanted those glasses so bad. I remember that growing up.
Well, I'm sure they're out there somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I know. They sold them at the time. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, and like I said, the movie was, I wouldn't say it was bad, but it wasn't very good. And as somebody who, I liked the X-Men movies, but like I only really started to get into them and interested in them when First Class dropped, because I thought that was just like heads and tails, like super above the quality of the other ones for what I was looking for in an X-Men movie. So I only really like got super interested when the First Class crew came in. I watched the other ones and I enjoyed them, but like when I became an X-Men fan was those movies. And to see not only that group of characters, but basically the franchise as a whole go out on a note that was basically, oh yeah, is kind of sad.
Yeah, that makes it even worse. It's like it's sad that it's happening in the first place, and it's made even worse by the fact that, like you've said in the past, it's going out with a fizzle and not like a bang. First Class, to me, I don't know, it didn't sink in, like it didn't hit me hard. Like I don't really recall a lot from First Class. To me, I'm a little bit older than you, I guess, just old enough that the original three, like the original X-Men, X2, and then what was it, Last Stand was the third one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those three were the ones that really hooked me in. I mean, X2 is probably the best, I would still say to this day.
Yeah, and I still enjoyed them. Like I said, I remember having like the X-Men toys and all that stuff. But X-Men was also kind of at least those early movies were kind of a victim of its time, at least to kids growing up like us. Because I remember the first movie that ever got me like super into superheroes and then superhero movies was Spider-Man. Because this was a kid who got bit by a spider. He was in school like everybody else, but then he was a superhero. And I could like super relate to that. But the X-Men was still, I think, before people really found out like superhero movies and like this is a good formula for what people like to see in a superhero movie. X-Men had come out and it stuck to its guns. So I give it props for that. It definitely didn't try and like, ooh, people might not like all these mutants are being like made fun of or they're not accepted by society, because that kind of plays into our regular society. They went deep. But because of that, I feel like it lost kind of a lot of children's interest. Because I remember watching it and being like, oh, cool powers. But then they would be having like political hearings over whether or not mutants should have human rights. And I was like, oh, I don't really care about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they were definitely designed in a time, as we've said in the past on this podcast as well, that like they were designed for the family to go to the movies and watch, to the theater, and may or may not ever actually own the DVD or whatever it was back then at home. I guess that was DVD time already.
It was like DVD and VHS.
Yeah, so they're definitely designed more for, I mean, it was back when like dramas with like serious dramas were really all the rage. So it was not a big deal to sprinkle in politics. And I know they were basically going to go, or at least what I've heard in the past is that if they had kind of carried it through, they would have done a Civil War style thing, but with basically the Fantastic Four versus the X-Men, and it boiled down to the rights of mutants and everything else that they had going on. Is it Mr. Fantastic? What's his name? The main guy?
Yeah, Mr. Fantastic.
Mr. Fantastic. So it would have kind of been Wolverine versus him. So it would have been a Marvel-esque Civil War movie before Civil War.
I did actually just hear that just recently. Some man had said he was actually commissioned to write a screenplay which would take all of the Fox-owned Marvel characters and bring them together. So I believe at the time it was like Fantastic Four, X-Men, Deadpool, and Daredevil are the ones he mentioned specifically, where he was like, yeah, I was tasked to do this, and they were trying to get it pushed up in like 2011 to take away some of the steam from the Avengers, but it ended up just never coming to fruition like that.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be one where literally all of them got together, like an Avengers style, to try and rival what I guess Marvel was doing at that time, or Marvel, but the MCU.
Yeah, I think that's what they were trying to do, especially, and he I don't think he said it in his interview like specifically, but by him just saying, yeah, they were trying to get it ready by 2011. The Avengers movie came out in 2012. So they were definitely trying to get there first and be like the first ones to go, oh no, look, we did it. We have everybody teamed up first.
Yeah, totally. And I think they knew. I think it became very evident very quick when the MCU spun up that all of these other properties will henceforth be living in the shadows, of their bigger brother, MCU.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword that Disney bought 20th Century Fox to me, because I'm excited that we'll get to see every Marvel superhero together now, because those were like the last holdouts were the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, which 20th Century Fox still owned. So I'm excited that we're going to get to see that. But also I feel like X-Men just recently found its footing. Like it was just starting to understand what it took to be a universe. Like they were spinning off. They had the most recent Deadpools. They spun off with Logan, which was incredible. They were trying to get New Mutants up and off the ground, but that seems like it's not going to come out for a little while later. And apparently there's rumors now that they might adapt it into the MCU if they can salvage it. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just something that I heard, or what people are speculating because of the reshoots that they're doing on everything. So I don't know if that's true, but like they just found it. Like they just got 2 TV shows up. They were making all of these good movies. Like I feel like they just figured out how to be a good universe, and then Disney stepped in and bought them. So excited that they'll be back, but kind of sad because I feel like they had enough characters where they totally could just spin out and do whatever they wanted. Like TV shows, additional movies, like X-Men could have existed in its own universe, and I would have been totally fine with that.
I'll give you that they may have just recently got their sort of understanding together about what it takes to be a universe. But looking back over all of these movies in preparation for today, I definitely think they had they had legs to stand on for a while. Like I do dig a lot of the early X-Men movies. Like I like a lot of those movies. I think they were great. They were well put together. They just may not have had the foresight to, put together enough to stitch a giant, more overarching universe and story and all that together.
Right. And I wasn't trying to say like, oh, they just started making good movies, but like the movies that came out before were good, but they were all just like X-Men movies or Wolverine movies, like they only just recently spun off with Deadpool and they were going to try out New Mutants, and they just got a TV series less than 3 years ago. What I was saying was like, they only just now figured out like, oh, we can do this universe thing. The MCU proved it was viable. and now we can do it too. And they have enough characters to be able to do it, but they just weren't able to like really get spinning. It's like they put their foot on the gas, but then Disney was like pulling the e-brake, and they're like, you're not going nowhere that fast.
I hope they give it a break for a little while. Like, I hope that, like, I would love to see a Deadpool 3 come out, like complete a Deadpool trilogy, but let that be, and you know, make it even more spectacular because it's the first one that Disney will have actually done with them, I guess. So they have now the capacity to sort of do even better than 1 and 2. I mean, 2 was great. It was great, but it didn't stand quite as high as the first one did. So now maybe with just like new backing, 3 would be awesome. Have a great Deadpool trilogy, and then give it a little time for everyone to miss the X-Men before you bring them back around. Or maybe, you know, in Deadpool 3, you tease at the fact that the universes are one and the same now, or something weird happened. It would be great to explain a rip in the, you know, timeline, time-space continuum or something. But I think Marvel got extremely lucky with Spider-Man already sort of coming back out, with there having been so many Spider-Men like recently in our lifetime, that I think is a smart move for him to take a deep breath. Don't do anything crazy, like don't wait a freaking decade, but you know, wait a handful of years before you start dumping X-Men content out again, and let it really sink in that it's part of the MCU now. Let everybody really get excited about it, and definitely do not rush it.
Yeah, and I think Spider-Man was kind of a good proving point for people are willing to accept different actors as different characters, like kind of more quickly than we would have before. I mean, Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out in 2014. Captain America Civil War came out in 2016, which means in the course of 2 years, we stopped one universe, started another universe, recast Spider-Man, and then put him in a different movie. And Marvel was like,
they got
what
lucky.
do you think?
Yeah, they got lucky. And it's because everybody already loved the MCU, so they had our trust from the beginning. So there was no like, oh no, you know, another Spider-Man. It was like, oh, this time it's the good one. It's the one we finally always wanted. So I don't know. You're gonna have a hard time pulling that one off with all of the X-Men.
Yeah, I think they'd be very smart, and it's been rumored a little bit. I think they'd be very smart to do kind of a slow rollout, which is what I heard they might be considering. Like instead of just full-on X-Men, it's like Storm, who in the comics gets married to Black Panther, is in Black Panther 2, or like she's teased or something, you know? Like it's a very slow rollout of people coming and like figuring out who they are, and like we just slowly assemble the team. You know what I mean?
Halle Berry.
No.
Okay. So Storm is one of my favorite characters. Like if you said out of all the X-Men, like what powers do you want? Like I love the Raiden, like Storm, Thor style, like power set. I really dig that. But one of my biggest critiques, and it's not really a huge critique, but since we're on the topic, one of my biggest critiques of especially like the first 3 movies were that just Storm was like a wet rag. Like she didn't really do a whole lot, not a whole lot of personality. Like had a few big moments, you know, turn the tides probably once or twice, but I felt like I love Halle Berry so much, and she just let me down.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they were just like, oh, Halle Berry said she'll be in this? Sweet. And then she was just in it.
Yeah.
But like those first couple movies, kind of like how we were talking about Dark Phoenix is like a Dark Phoenix movie featuring the X-Men. The X-Men all had good like arcs and stuff, I would say, in the first 3, but it definitely was more in tune with like Wolverine featuring the X-Men.
Yeah. Now, Remind me again. See, okay, so I'll tell you what. Why don't we just do this? Why don't we leverage your superhuman ability
Mhm.
and just rattle me off all the X-Men movies?
Okay, there's been 12 of them so far, including Dark Phoenix. Let me make sure I get them in order. So X-Men, X2, X-Men: The Last Stand, X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, The Wolverine, X-Men Days of Future Past, uh, Deadpool, I think, came out. Um, X-Men Apocalypse, Logan, Deadpool 2, Dark Phoenix.
So was First Class the one that was like young Professor X, young Magneto?
Yes.
That
That's the
one,
one that restarted with like James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender and stuff.
that one was one of my absolute favorites for sure. That one goes to like the top three. And then I already said Days of Futures Past. I already said X-Men 2, X2. I like the original as well. And you know what? Like super, super unpopular opinion is I loved the Wolverine movie, the one where that starts out with a huge montage of him and his brother fighting through all the wars.
Oh yeah, so you like X-Men Origins Wolverine?
X-Men Origins Wolverine. That's the one. You got to say it right because a lot of them sound similar. A
Yeah.
lot of people put that one at like the bottom of their list, the one with bad Deadpool. But I really I didn't absolutely hate it. I think that was also the one potentially where they like teased a little bit of Gambit or something and then just like took it away. So a lot of people hold that against it. But I think that one's kind of up there for me as well.
Yeah, Gambit was in that one. That one I remember like liking a lot when it first came out, but then like the more I've rewatched it, the more I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. like the Deadpool is the merc with the mouth is literally like his slogan. Like when you think like Captain America, super soldier, you think Deadpool, merc with a mouth, and they sewed his mouth shut.
Yeah, yeah, I know. They made some terrible decisions, but it was cool to see like more the backstory, and you always get Wolverine with like the interpersonal struggle, And then they did the other Wolverine one too, where it was more like Asian focused.
Yeah, the Wolverine. He went to Japan because there was a man he protected in World War II that was dying, and he wanted to see Wolverine one more time to like say goodbye to the man who saved his life. Turns out that's not at all what he was doing. He was yanking Wolverine's powers so that he could be like immortal and keep living. And so Wolverine goes for a good majority of that movie without powers, and it actually makes for like a very interesting movie. I like the Wolverine a pretty good bit, but I feel like a lot of people really haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's one where I was like, I watched it, and again, it's like that's great action. It was cool. It was unique because of the setting and sort of the tone was definitely more unique. And when I got done watching it, I said I definitely want to see more of that. But it was kind of more blah, and it felt more standalone-y than the rest of them, even though, like, I mean, Logan. So I still have a confession to make. I still have not seen Logan, but I have a feeling it's going to feel very, like, standalone-esque as well.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Logan.
No, everybody says it's so good. I reminded myself when I was looking at all these movies that I have not yet seen it, and it has not been put on my to watch list until now. So it's now on the watch list, and it will get watched. I
Logan is
really kind of want
probably
to go back and rewatch all of these movies, dude, because I love the X-Men, but I just haven't dug in as deep as I should. Like, I haven't sunk into it like I have the MCU.
yeah, and that's kind of one of the issues or one of the things that I think that they were rectifying now is I feel like up until this point it was like, oh cool, yeah, and the X-Men movies. Yeah, it's like The Simpsons to compare it to that. You don't always watch it, but it's there. And you're like, "Oh cool, another X-Men movie. Sweet." But like Marvel movies have been marketed and been like they've climaxed to basically being can't miss movie events. Like if you don't see this movie, you're not going to know what's going to happen in the next one, and you're not going to be like, cool hanging out with all your friends, talking about your theories and stuff, like understanding what's going on.
Well, and I think the depth and complexity of all of these characters and the stories is so much. Like X-Men was one of the very first superhero movies that came out. Oh, did I just hear a sound?
Yeah, you just heard a sound.
What does that sound mean?
That sound means it's halftime.
Woo-woo!
So halftime, if you haven't listened before, is the part of the show where Crocker and I take a break from the conversation we're having, and we talk about recent trailers we've seen, movie news, things we're excited about. It's also been the part of the show where we've been giving away our digital copies. We're going to continue that this week, and we're going to be giving away The Predator, the newest Predator movie that just came out. And so if you want to be entered to win that free digital code, all you got to do is enter the code word CHOPPA below, CHOPPA, or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram. Again, the code word is CHOPPA, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of The Predator.
We have a whole episode on that one, right?
I don't think so.
Did we not do it? I know we saw it together. Did we not do an episode on it?
I honestly don't know if we did or not. I don't think that we did, because I'm like racking my brain trying to remember what I could have made for a Predator YouTube thumbnail, but I can't think of what it was, so I don't think that we have, only for that fact.
Well, either way, it's a good one.
What you got?
All right, so as much as I know the purpose of halftime is like movie news and summer blockbusters, and for like the past 3 weeks I have updated us on something weird that's happening at Galaxy's Edge in Disney, and today will be no different. Going to do the exact same.
It's connected. It's Star Wars.
It is so connected. So get this is just something really cool that I think you'll appreciate. You may already know about it, you may not. So as I'm sure everyone is aware, there's Savvy's Workshop, which is where you can build lightsabers now. We've talked about that before. You can buy pre-made like lightsabers from other people in the Star Wars universe. And of course, one of the major components of these lightsabers is the kyber crystal. And when you build your own lightsaber, you can pick between like the stereotypical blue, green, red, and then they've thrown in the purple as well. And then if you would like, from like the gift shop, you can buy a yellow and a white. So those are, what is that, 6 colors of kyber crystals. And then if you put them in the holocrons, they'll all say different things. They dictate the color of your lightsaber. So it's really kind of a cool thing to play around with. Well, like 1 or 2 that get sold a day, red kyber crystals, 1 or 2 red kyber crystals that get sold a day are actually black crystals, and they come in the red packaging, and you get a special little note that says, you know, basically you found a very rare obsidian encrusted, like, or obsidian infused kyber crystal that behaves and looks similar to a red one. And the theory is, I have not gotten proof of this yet, but I think the theory is that if you find that one rare one and you put it into a holocron, it will have different like sayings and lingo that it throws at you from the holocron, which is really neat. It looks and acts just like a red crystal in a lightsaber, but it just makes me so happy to see that they've gone like that deep with it. And that if people are just now finding out those little sort of Disney secrets that they're doing like this, then it's getting me even more pumped to go experience Galaxy's Edge, because little things like that is so awesome to me, that just, you know, 1 or 2 out of probably the few hundred they sell that day are going to be the rare ones.
That is pretty cool. I thought when you were saying it, I was like, oh my God, people are going to have black lightsabers?
Well, there is the black saber. That is a thing. That is a thing in the animated series. They actually go through that and show it to you. And that's what people were thinking. But no, it's just an obsidian infused or encrusted or however they do it.
That is pretty cool. Now I'm curious, like, what it says on the holocron. Because if I know Disney, I know that the hunt probably doesn't stop there. Like, they probably don't just put it in the holocron and it's like, long live Vader or something like that, you know? It's probably like, find this person. Like, it's the next part of a clue or something like that crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping.
Would be cool.
And then really other than that, Well, let's just continue with Star Wars. So, Jedi Fallen Order, it has basically, you sent me this yesterday. There's been a gameplay review or gameplay drop of that. Looks great, plays pretty awesome from what we've been able to see. But the biggest news is that they have actually brought in characters that we know and love. Two of the big ones they showed during the gameplay reveal were Saul and then the robot guys. It's like K2SO.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? K2SO?
Yeah, I think so.
I nailed it. Whoop, whoop. So those two are for sure in there, and they're saying that we're going to see characters from movies other than just Rogue One as well. So it's pretty neat and getting me pumped. Still have a lot of questions about the game. Like, still want to know a lot more about it, but force powers look fantastic. Like they teased the ability to like stop a blaster bolt, which is, and then actually use your other hand to like force pull someone through that blaster bolt and kill them while you've held it in midair. So little things like that have me extremely excited.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I was very excited to see that gameplay stuff yesterday.
And then on an actual movie note, probably the most excited I've been about a not superhero or Star Wars movie in a while is the new Ford versus Ferrari movie they're coming out with, which is all about Carroll Shelby and Lee Iacocca, who's the famous Ford guy that designed the Mustang and really sort of brought him back from the brink of bankruptcy a couple of times, and obviously played a huge hand in Ford beating Ferrari back in the 60s with all of the Shelby Cobras and of the GT and all that good stuff. And it's Matt Damon and Christian Bale. So I'm just super, super excited. We've got a proper trailer for that out now.
Yeah, we got to watch that trailer before Dark Phoenix today. It does look pretty interesting.
Oh, did you? Awesome. Good. I'm glad it's getting out there.
Yeah.
I was afraid this was going to be one of those like almost like not a documentary because it's not, but oftentimes those like real life racing story movies just really kind of fall under the radar. And I want this one to be huge and fantastic.
Hey, I remember my brother having the Days of Thunder soundtrack on cassette tape.
Days of Thunder was a bit of a different story.
And I don't know. I don't know if it was true or not. It probably might not be true. I don't think it's a true story. But I
don't think
it's distinctly.
No.
Is that it for you for halftime?
That's all I got. That's all I got. What do you got?
Okay, I actually have a lot, but it's not a lot of like reviews or stuff. It's just news that we've gotten that I'm super pumped about. So first up, Harrison Ford said that Indiana Jones 5 is looking to start shooting next year. So that's awesome, but I kind of take that with a grain of salt because it took them 20 years to give us from The Last Crusade to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I'll believe it when I see it and when it actually starts shooting, but that's awesome that it seems like it's definitely moving forward. A new Netflix show is coming that's going to be an animated Jurassic World spinoff called Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, which seems really interesting. They showed a picture of, it's going to be basically about like a camp of kids who accidentally get lost in the park or something, and so they have to band together to survive all these dinosaurs and stuff. And they released a picture, and the kids looked kind of weird, like they were kind of like malformed, but like of cartoon shape, like things that you would see in cartoons. At least that's what it looked like. But then they actually released a little semi-trailer, and it was a velociraptor walking through the park, and the velociraptor looked pretty real. So I'm very curious as to what the show is going to be, how they're going to balance that out. But it seems interesting. I'll definitely check it out. We got a new trailer for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which seems like it's going to be more of a Goosebumps type movie of them finding the scary stories to tell in the dark book, and then the stories coming to life. And that's how they're going to adapt all of these tiny like short stories. So it won't be an anthology movie. Like some people were thinking it's just going to be one big movie where each story has its like own part to play. So that's pretty interesting. In case you didn't know, and I didn't know, they're making a horror movie based off of Magic 8 Ball, the toy Magic 8 Ball.
Yes, someone told me that a while back, and I hadn't heard anything else about it.
Well, apparently the guy who directed Kick-Ass 2 will be directing it. So if that's going to give us any beliefs, it's probably going to suck.
Hey, Kick-Ass 2 wasn't terrible. It was nothing like Kick-Ass 1, which was fantastic, but it wasn't terrible.
The ending was really good. Okay. One that I think you'll be super excited about. Apparently, Quentin Tarantino and a stand-up comedian, Gerard Carmichael, are teaming up to start writing a Django Zorro crossover movie.
What?
Yeah.
Dude, we got to get a proper Zorro. I used to watch Zorro so much, the black and white Zorro growing up. It played a huge part in my childhood.
Well, apparently Quentin Tarantino already wrote a Django Zorro comic book that's either been releasing or is soon to be released. And I guess he got like super jazzed up about that storyline. And so he's trying to adapt it into a feature film script now.
That is awesome, dude.
I knew that you would like that.
Heck yes. Love me some Zorro.
Continuing on, by the time this episode comes out, it may be released already, but Rob Zombie has been teasing that the 3 from Hell trailer, which is his sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects, will be coming out on Monday. I'm not sure what time Monday, but I am super pumped for that because I love both of those movies, and I'm very interested to see. They've been very tight-lipped on basically anything of the plot besides just a few pictures where you can kind of see what you think people might be up to. So I'm very curious about what that movie is actually going to be. Never Hike Alone, which was an awesome Friday the 13th fan movie, is actually getting a sequel, and I think they're going to start crowdfunding soon, but they're bringing back a guy who played Tommy Jarvis in the original franchise, who played him in Part 6, and who cameoed in the first Never Hike Alone. He's going to be one of, or if not the main character in Never Hike Alone 2, and it's going to have him straight up fighting Jason again. So that's super awesome. Super excited to see that. John Cena was officially cast in Fast and Furious 9. So I don't know what he's going to be, but he was officially cast. Swamp Thing was canceled on DC Universe after 1 episode aired.
Bums me out, dude.
Yeah, so I don't know what went wrong there, but it aired 1 episode and they were like, not for us.
People were so pumped for it though, at least in our community.
Yeah, and the first episode came out and I watched it and it just didn't catch me. It was good. It looked beautiful, but it just didn't like catch me. I've yet to watch the second episode. Hopefully that one's better and gets kind of more in tune with the story I was expecting from Swamp Thing. Toy Story 4 early reviews are starting to come out and people are calling it amazing and like super heartfelt and sentimental. They said it has a definitive end, like as much as Toy Story 3 did, but it also sets up for a future of Toy Story featuring like a bunch of new characters if they want to go that route. So I'm very curious to watch it, but people are calling it amazing.
I mean, I expected nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I was really hoping. It's the same thing like when a Marvel movie comes out. I'm always like, oh, super excited, looks awesome. But then like the week before, so I'm like, wait, but what if this is the one that really sucks?
Has a Pixar movie ever really sucked? Have they ever had a flop in the history?
Not a flop financially, I don't think, but critically, yes. Especially in the last couple of years, they have definitely taken a couple hits away from their like 90% approval rating that they used to be getting every movie.
Maybe I'm just not up to speed then.
Yeah, like Cars 2 is their worst reviewed. I think it's actually rotten. I don't think it's fresh at all. And that started kind of the downtrend. Brave was fresh, but I think it was like in the 70s maybe, but I actually really liked Brave a lot. Cars 3 was, I think, more of like on Brave's level of it wasn't as high up there, but it was still fresh. And then Good Dinosaur was that way too. And I think so was Monsters University.
Yeah, Monsters University, Good Dinosaur, Inside Out. Yeah, I could see how those didn't do so hot. But
well, Inside Out actually did really good. Inside Out, I know, has like a 94% approval rating or something like that.
I'm surprised Brave. I thought Brave did just freaking awesome.
Yeah, I loved Brave.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't mind Cars 3. Cars 3 was not bad.
I didn't mind Cars too.
And then for the last part of my halftime, which I'm super excited about, it was the 35th anniversary of the Ghostbusters this year. And they're coming out now with Ghostbusters 3 next year, which they've been very tight-lipped on that as well. We're not really sure what's going on. But Sigourney Weaver has just come out and announced that she will be returning to the role of Dana Barrett, which she played in Ghostbusters 1 and 2 for the new Ghostbusters movie.
Heck yeah.
Which means that probably Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and like all of those guys are going to be asked back as well, which would be awesome to see.
Yeah, I thought that was the plan the whole time.
They have not been asked yet, but I think it is the plan, like, moving forward. So hopefully that is the direction, like, they just keep going that way.
So are they going to start filming next year, or is it coming out next year?
It's coming out next year. Apparently they've already had, like, the script written and it had been greenlit and stuff. When they announced it with a teaser trailer. So I don't know if it's already shooting or has shot or what, but it is a very, like, secretive movie, and I don't really know a lot of, like, what's going on.
Well, if they haven't been asked back yet, then I would imagine they ain't going to be in it, or at least not a big part. And
Or
I guarantee, do what?
They might have been asked back and just been like, hey, don't announce it to anybody because we don't want them to know yet.
That's what I hope.
Yeah, I mean, if they bring Sigourney Weaver back, there's no reason for them not to bring the OGs back. They were in, like, every single one of them was in the Ghostbusters remake, but they just weren't playing their original Ghostbusters role. But they were all back in it.
Well, only time will tell.
Yeah. But that's it for halftime for me this week. Not a lot of, like, trailers or anything, but a lot of, like, pretty cool news and stuff that I got excited about.
Awesome. All right. Picking back up, X-Men.
Okay.
What I was about to say before halftime is that, one, it's a double-edged sword of, like, why people aren't on top of the X-Men universe like they are for Marvel. I think a lot of that is just traditionally they weren't on top of it, so they have not taken the time to get on top of everything and, like, who all the characters are and all of that. And I believe a big reason for that is because these movies, even more so than the MCU, are movies where you'll see, like, characters that are someone in the comics and just not necessarily know who they are or what they do or what their power is. Like, the first time you watch a X-Men movie, you may see someone and have no idea who they are, have never heard of them before, and have, no expectations for them as far as what possible powers they could have and all of that. And I remember even going back, like, playing Marvel versus Capcom, like, 2, like, way back in the day, and there were like 30 just people in the X-Men category on that. Like, there are so many, they all have their own stories. You have to respect them all as, like, who they are because of the comics. And I think that level of depth makes it really hard for people to, like, totally jump in. Whereas with the MCU, it's more like Thor, we can learn about Thor. Iron Man, we can learn about Iron Man. Hawkeye, we can learn about Hawkeye. Doctor Strange, we can learn about Doctor Strange. And other than really Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's even a small number of individuals, it's not just like an endless amount of people. So I don't know. I think they have suffered from having too many things to draw from and too much depth to the different stories that people cannot easily latch on and become, 95% familiar with the existing universe,
Oh yeah, I mean, and even, like, kind of the mainstays that have happened over the universe. So Wolverine, Professor X, Magneto, Mystique, Storm for the most part, Cyclops. Like, even those mainstays, like, of that, there's still a rotating cast of characters, like, behind the scenes that we never really get to see, you know, like when the first Deadpool movie came out and Colossus was in it, everyone was like, oh, cool, Colossus. But like Colossus was in the first 3 X-Men movies. He just never said a word and only like turned to steel every couple of times, you know, but like he was in there. And then the same, like, it's also just kind of confusing with everybody's powers. Like if you don't stay up to date on it, you don't really know what everybody does. Whereas Marvel's like pared it down a lot more. And so you see, like, you've seen Steve Rogers in one movie, you're like, okay, got it. He's a super soldier. He can run and jump and punch and like do all this stuff really good. And same as Iron Man. He might have new tech, but you're like, okay, suit of armor. Got it. Whereas the X-Men, and this kind of even came up today because we didn't rewatch X-Men Apocalypse before seeing Dark Phoenix, and I'm like super into it. I know who everybody is. I know what their powers are. But my wife, as we were walking out, was like, oh, I definitely should have rewatched Apocalypse because it took me like the first 20 minutes of the movie to remember who those people were and what their powers were. Like they had to use them once for me to be like, oh, I remember now.
Yeah, and who was that in Deadpool that had the helmet on that would charge through the walls?
Juggernaut.
Juggernaut has been in some in the past. In the X-Men and the Wolverine Origins movie that I like with Bad Deadpool, you get the big guy. What's his name? The boxer.
Oh yeah, the Blob.
The Blob. There was Angel was in one of the movies. Like
Angel was in
Days of Future Past.
No, he was in X-Men 3 and Apocalypse.
I thought he was in Days of Futures Past.
No, he was in The Last Stand and he was in Apocalypse. He was one of the
Last Stand. That's where I was thinking of him. Yeah.
He was one of the 4 horsemen and he got like metal angel wings and then he died. They killed him.
They ripped the wings off, I believe, at some point. So yeah, there's so many options to explore. And then there's the things that like the rest of the world want. Like we know that if they did a Gambit movie right, it would be the biggest X-Men movie of all time. It's probably the most asked for X-Men movie. And if they could knock it out of the park, if they could freaking MCU a Gambit movie, it took for like introducing the MCU or something crazy like that, it would be the biggest X-Men movie that's ever come out.
Oh, I definitely think that we're going to see a shakeup of characters between this franchise and then the MCU franchise because they're definitely going to want to establish themselves as like something different. They don't want people to get confused with the old X-Men movies. They definitely are going to want to be like, no, new X-Men. So I think it'll probably still be Wolverine for sure. And that's one of the main reasons I think that they'll be recasting everybody. If Wolverine was still up and around and kicking in this modern universe, they might not be as gung-ho to reboot everything because they're like, oh, well, people like these characters. Let's just try and bring them in. But they're not going to make an X-Men movie without Wolverine. No way. So I didn't
mean to cut you off there, but I hope, and I'm afraid that they could do this, that they, in their attempt to draw such a distinction, we get something as silly as like all the X-Men like looking way off base, or maybe they all wear like some insanely cheesy X-Men comic book outfits or something that just really doesn't fit in with sort of the more realistic tune of the MCU, or worse yet, they paint them as like villains to introduce them somehow, which I think we may eventually get to, but as it's like in their effort to maintain a huge distinction between old X-Men canon and new MCU X-Men, like I hope they don't go too overboard with it because I think it'll be easy to do, seeing as to how they obviously want to maintain separation.
Yeah, I don't think they will. I mean, the MCU is super smart and like they know what we want to see. And up until, I mean, even like Apocalypse, we didn't get to see the X-Men in their like traditional uniforms, you know, like we had never gotten that before, like blue and yellow traditional uniforms. Even just like when they have different uniforms, but they're all like, everybody has the same mainstay, you know? Like, we didn't even really get that until Apocalypse and now Dark Phoenix. So I think moving forward, Disney definitely needs to like dig deep into that well of comic book lore and find what people really responded to for that kind of stuff, and like kick off almost a nostalgia fueled X-Men movie of, hey, remember the X-Men from the 90s, the animated series and the comics, and everybody was like super into them? That's kind of what we're bringing into this universe. And I think Disney could do that really well.
It would be awesome if somehow, because, you know, we've said this before, like, I think Deadpool would be, I hope Deadpool is like the keystone in introducing the X-Men to the MCU. If like all of a sudden you get this rip in like space time and like the Avengers are there and Deadpool's there, and all of a sudden you get all the X-Men, or at least the big names, come through wearing like blue and yellow spandex, like hardcore, you know, straight out of the comics, and just get something witty from Deadpool that's, you know, making fun of them wearing that, and then just sort of address it, get that hero shot of them all lined up in their bright blue and orange, you know, with the buckles and the X buckles and the patches on their shoulders and all of that. I would love to see that. Just straight don the traditional comic book gear, even if it's for no more than to make a funny joke about the fact that they'll never be seen in that again in this universe.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, that is what I really hope happens. Like, that would be an awesome tease at the end of whatever movie they decide to bring the X-Men in on. But we've already talked about it before in our Spider-Man Far From Home podcast, that I believe at least that the multiverse is going to be the reason, or is at least a great reason to bring the X-Men into our universe. And so that could be something totally hilarious of them all walking in, and it's like always exactly what we've wanted to see. And then we see Deadpool, like another portal opens up and Deadpool walks through and he's like, these guys look stupid. Hey, what are you up to over there? Like something like that, you know, like just like a quick little thing of, your costumes look dumb. Hey, what are you guys doing?
You know, it would be the greatest tease ever, though, is if at the end of Django, Zorro, there's a Lone Ranger tease. We thrust into that universe. That's what I want.
Django, Zorro, and the Lone Ranger.
Yes, bro. And then Don Quixote as well. Just bring them all together.
You're asking for like the Western Avengers that literally nobody but you is asking for.
But it would be so good. You know it would.
I don't know. I don't know if every franchise needs to be a universe.
Sure it does. Well, Zorro definitely does, and so does Lone Ranger, and so does Django. I would be up for all of those getting more. Maybe not their own universe, but if you throw them all together, get a superverse.
Okay, nice quick pitch from Crocker, pitching his Django Zorro verse. I mean, I it would probably be pretty cool, but yeah, and now that Disney has the reins, they know 100% how easy it is to spin stuff off. And now that they've also got the Disney Plus stuff up and running, and that's apparently going to connect to the movies in huge ways, what a great way to be able to introduce a bunch of mutants. Like, let's start with just a team of 5, you know, or 6, like something very like the first Avengers movie, Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, give us just a pared down team with only these 5. And then let's spin up a Disney Plus series of like another 3 or 4 mutants that end up meeting each other. And then at the end of season 1, they get to the academy, and then now they're in the movies. Like, what? That's such a great way to be able to kind of diversify how you're telling these stories, because nobody would be wanting to commit 8 hours to like unknown characters if it was a movie. Nobody would go see 4 movies like back to back to back watching these unknown characters. But like,
Speak for yourself.
Huh?
Speak for yourself.
Well, I mean, like, if it's smaller characters, I guess I misspoke, because definitely people would do that. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Be there right beside me.
Yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy showed that people would do that. But it's I don't know. Let me think of my phrasing. easier to tell a bigger story now through the use of Disney Plus. Whereas if they were complete unknowns, maybe telling that big of a story would almost be too big of a chunk to bite off at first. Whereas now it's like they can chew in kind of like different places. And so you're getting a really digestible bite, whereas before it would have been too big of a chunk, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, they have more time to play around with, and they can get it seen by more people easier.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Well, I love the X-Men. I don't think they get enough credit in comparisons when people today speak of superhero movies. It's unfortunate that they're going out on a fizzle. That's extremely unfortunate, especially after some of the awesome things that have come before. But I have hope for the future. I'm optimistic. I don't think that the Disney acquisition was a bad thing, and I know that we'll be seeing more X-Men to come.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like as I was walking out today, I was like, well, that was the last one. That was the last X-Men movie. And then a second after that, I was like, well, in that universe.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we still have New Mutants coming out. And I don't know what they're doing with New Mutants because I've heard rumors, like I was saying earlier. Apparently, they might be trying to put it into the MCU. I don't know if they're going to do that, or I don't know if they're just going to keep the reshoots going that they said that they were going to do when it was still 20th Century Fox, and they're going to just try and get it up and running and see what people think, and then maybe it'll be in the MCU. Honestly, don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see on New Mutants. But yes, I agree with you. I think that while this franchise, which kind of carried us into the like X-Men was always the guiding hand of like moving forward into this big superhero movie universe that we live in now, where a new one comes out every other week. It's nice to see it go on to its next evolution, but it is sad to see like this like nice thing move on.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't think we've seen the end of the X-Men. I definitely like this is just the beginning, I feel like, for a lot of characters in pop culture. I feel like we're only just getting started on certain characters. But I guess that about wraps us up here today, unless you have anything else you want to say, Crocker.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Please enter to win the free digital copy of The Predator by using the code word CHOPPA and sending that to me on Instagram or commenting it below on YouTube. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crockalicious.
We thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
That was a long one.
Get to the chopper.